This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. Welcome to the 2019 Spring Chess Classic. Hey, we're just coming right on in. No intro today, folks. My name is Ben Simon alongside Grandmaster Aman Hambleton, and you caught us in the midst of a very positive conversation about today's round.
And Steve, Stone Cold Austin.
Yeah, we were talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin. Well, welcome in. It's like you're right here with us. Today, we are 100% public, and we want you to join us in the YouTube chat. We have that open already, and we are just so excited because we still have a 6-way logjam in Group A. So let's kick it off with those standings. Now, yesterday, all draws, and that's the first time this has happened in this tournament. We see a lot of dynamic play. We see a lot of dynamic results. Yesterday, though, was a different story. And the cool thing about today is that all 6 of those frontrunners are playing each other. Aman, what is your take on Group A thus far?
Well, I think the potential of the logjam continuing remains intact, because if we imagine those 3 games being drawn, there you go. Those players extend the six-way tie on top of the table up to 3.5 points. So we'll see if that happens today, but it's obviously very interesting to see over a couple rounds the same players being tied at the top of the table. There's just nothing to come between any of these players so far, and we'll see if the players who are in the bottom of the table can turn their tournaments around, because in a strong tournament like this, very high average rating, no easy games, I get the feeling that once you sort of establish yourself at the bottom of that table, it's so hard to dig yourself out. You lose confidence, and everyone starts to sort of smell blood and start to pick on you. So we'll see if those guys at the bottom of the table can reroute their tournaments.
Very well. And let's glance over at our Challengers division, Group B, where it's a different story indeed, as the Chinese Grandmaster Bai Jinshi is in clear first, and we mean clear, 1.5 points up against the 3 second-place players. What percentage, going from here on out, what percentage would you give Bai Jinshi as finishing in first place? Clear first.
Clear first.
Yes.
I think
80%?
I think 80 is, that's a minimalist approach to this. Bai Jinshi, by the way, he won his yesterday game, and that game looked like it might have been a draw against Nicholas Theodorou, but he somehow managed to pull off a win. As we left that game at the end of the broadcast, it looked dead drawn. So very impressive. I expected only a 1-point lead today, but 1.5 points. He's really starting to take off from the rest of the pack here.
If you're just joining us for the first day, welcome. Let's take a look at the format and introduce you to what these players are going up against. Remember, this is a two fields, 10-player round robins, time control game in 90 minutes for the first 40 move. The second time control kicks in and adds 30 minutes on at move 41. And then there is a 30-second increment from the very first move. The players have to take notation the entire game, of course, and we will not see many games end on the clock. There is a 30-move draw rule in effect, which means that the players cannot offer or agree to a draw before Black's 30th move has been played. And like I said before, be sure to join us all across social media on YouTube with the chat, and also at #SpringChessClassic. We are on Facebook as well, by the way, so hello to you Facebook viewers. Remember, uschesschamps.com is where you're going to want to go to see these games on the digital board. So follow along at uschesschamps.com. And speaking of that, every day at 1 p.m., those games are underway, and every day at 3:30 p.m. is whenever we come on the air with you. The last day is a little bit different, because the last day we will have playoffs if necessary. The last day is Sunday. Mark that down. Clear your schedule, because if we have playoffs especially, you're going to want to be here with us.
Absolutely. No better place to be.
The games are going on right now upstairs, 2 floors up. Let's take a look at the pairings for Group A today. Rustam Kazimjanov versus Varuzhin Akopian. Vasily Ivanchuk versus Benjamin Bach. Ray Robson versus Eric Hanson. Ilya Nizhnik versus Aryan Tari. And our key matchup, Jeffrey Zhang versus Liam Lee. It's important to note, though, as I said earlier, that all 6 frontrunners that stand at 3 points are playing each other today. So really, there could be 3 key matchups today. We're going with this one because, well, the highest rated players are in it. So let's glance at Zhang versus Li. What's going on in this game so far, Aman?
Well, we have Jeffrey Zhang here, as you mentioned, leading the tournament along with 5 other friends of his. And we have this position here that's opening up a pretty significant, I want to say, time advantage for Jeffrey, just to start off. Now, Lequang Liam, as we maybe just go back a little bit in this game, he's in a position here that offhand doesn't look very good. He's got these disconnected pawns, especially that pawn on d4 is very loose. And that queen, I mean, I'm having nightmares that it's just going to get trapped in there somehow, as you've got ideas like rook to f6 coming in, and you know, that queen is running out of squares. But how did we get here? How did Lequang end up in a position like this against Jeffrey? Well, we have this very standard idea of throwing out the check in this opening. And why does black do that? Because if white plays bishop d2, he says, okay, I wanted to play bishop e7 anyway, and your bishop on d2, well, maybe it's not that well placed. A lot of times what white would do, if black just played here, is later on he would put his bishop on b2. And if he wants to do that now, he's going to have to spend that one extra move. So you sort of force him to commit that bishop to the c1 h6 diagonal, which you know, restricts his flexibility in development. So we see the Catalan position developing, and believe me, there is a lot of theory, a lot of games played in this line. So this is very explored territory for these players right here. And h4 played by Jeffrey, because a lot of times what you'll see, not necessarily right away, but one of the main ideas is a move like g5. Now, it doesn't have to happen right here, but that idea of g5 kicks this bishop away. In the end, you can also kick that knight away. You can get the f-pawn up the board. So something, you know, as insane as just g5 and f5. Pawn storm on the king's side is actually one of the main ideas in this opening. So Jeffrey's actually taken the approach of, nope, you're not doing that today. No g5 for you. Takes away one of the main plans for black. And in exchange, though, he does move a pawn near his king and sort of does waste a move there. But h4 prevents g5 and does give the king some extra breathing room. h6, renewing the threat. And we do see Lequang playing very similar to how I was discussing.
What just happened there? The knight to e4.
Knight takes
oh,
e4.
knight takes e4. Okay,
right.
Me, I didn't see that.
I'll do it again in slow motion.
Thank you very much. It'd be impressive if you could actually
do
do
slow
slow
motion. Actually do. I think I can do slow
motion.
motion like this.
No.
Okay. Knight e5 takes, and we have a very interesting position where now, if I'm honest, I wish that I could grab that pawn on h4 and just put it right back on h2, if I could. If this pawn were here, I think white would be a lot happier. It may actually be a target in some lines. And also, if you ever want to play f3 to hit this pawn here, again, you might wish your pawn was back on h2 because it just supports this g3 pawn. It might be a little bit weaker now. But again, I think white is doing well here in this position based on the bishops. Look at that guy on c8. He's not happy. It's going to take a long time for that bishop to ever develop over here. And white's going to break with f3. And seems to be a good position for Jeffrey.
You said that h4 looks to be a target. Is it worth considering bishop takes h4 straight away, giving up the bishop for 2 pawns?
Well, the problem with that move is that I need more firepower. So if I do this, we could say, great, my queen's out there, I've got a nice rook looking here, but what about these 2 pieces? They're just not participating. And it's nearly impossible for a queen and a rook to checkmate a king in the middle of the game, where you have like 2 bishops, a rook near the white king, just all these defenders. So something that he has to be careful of, but I don't think anytime soon, because you got to get those pieces out for black before you're making any serious threats.
Very well.
So f3 was played to break the pawn center, and what we actually saw here was basically, Lequang's got a solid center here, but he's got that bishop that is going to be a real issue. So moving forward here, he actually decides to give up the pawn. He doesn't want to take here. Maybe white takes back, starts to push those pawns up the board. He elects to give that pawn up momentarily and go after the c pawn instead. Now, I don't know about the calculations here on these moves, because it seems to me offhand like black is playing very, very loose, allowing this pawn in the center to be captured. White actually takes a second pawn on b7, so very temporarily up a pawn here, but they are actually tripled on the e-file, so you can't be too proud of those. But it's how Jeffrey plays after that I think is the real boost to his position. It's not about that extra pawn, it's about the time. Black has to take time to take these pawns back. White says, okay, I'm going to double on the f-file, I've got my queen on the 7th rank, and all of a sudden, we see some serious threats to the black king here, as White's center has collapsed, but Black's king is the one that's under fire. So I'm very curious how this position develops here, as it seems to me like Le Quang has trouble actually making moves here. We see White finding time for moves like king h3, bishop e2. In this position, rook f7. I mean, it seems to me like, you see Le Quang shuffling the rook there, making moves like a5. Jeffrey seems to be in command in this position here. So as we reach the current position, I believe we're sitting here after the move bishop e8, rook e7.
Oh, okay. I was wondering why the queen just didn't take the d4 pawn. Now I see, because the bishop moves to e8, discover attack on the rook. Okay.
Right. So that's why here, that move would be well met by simply bishop e8, taking the rook. So he played queen c5, bishop e8, rook e7, and this pawn is something to worry about for Jeffrey, but honestly, these pieces have a real hard time entering the game. Rook b8 will always be met by, let's say, b3 if I just want to protect everything. And in the meantime, I've got pieces joining the attack, and long term, I think I said initially, I'm worried about that queen. You do run out of squares if you're not careful here.
All right. Well, that's where we stand right now with Jeffrey Zhang and Liam Lee. Let's take a look over at Group B and the pairings going on in that division. Steingrimson versus Kadrich, Kirilla versus Mistah, Kadonoff versus Ehrenberg, Baryshpolets versus Theodoro, and our key matchup in Group B is Baijinshi versus Alexei Sorokin. This is a first-time matchup, and it's a chance for Baijinshi just to simply increase his lead against the bottom seed. So big day for him. I don't know if I can say it'll be an easy point, but let's see where, just by the numbers, I don't know, no insult to Sorokin intended, but where do we stand in this game?
Yeah, no, that's the thing with these tournaments, and why I think all the players like these tournaments hosted at the St. Louis Chess Club, is because you always feel like you can beat anyone in the field. And likewise for Baijinshi, I'm sure that he feels he can also lose to anyone in this field. So, you got an FM rated over 2,500. That's almost scarier than facing a GM. That guy's, you got to be careful of those guys.
What's this guy up to?
Unknown, exactly. What's his motif? So Alexei Sorokin here, he's playing with the black pieces, and once again, this is a type of position that I sort of classify as one of those positions you can grind, try to win, but I don't feel like you ever risk losing from Baijinshi's perspective here. So he's got the pawns out of the way. This bishop's not causing any problem. You have this long-term idea of maybe bringing the king all the way in. This pawn here, if you leave it, rook a6, all of a sudden I might just take that pawn. And c4 is an idea that actually kicks the bishop out, and we actually see the move c4 played on the board. That's pretty much an automatic. That bishop is so nicely anchored there on d5. You want to disrupt the harmony in black's position and say, okay, you got to move your bishop now. If you go to e4, then maybe you give me a tempo on my king, taking a jog up the board. You also block the e-file for your pieces to use. And the nice thing is, if we just imagine this position, because I do have to watch this pawn, so probably will play bishop e4. White's got control of the only two open files that are really workable here, and the other open file, black is blocking with his own bishop. So White's really got full control in this position. Now, is he up material? No. Or is he threatening to win material? Not exactly, but I think that long term he's just got all the pressure in the position. You've got ideas of moving your king up. You've got a bishop that's not actually doing anything, so you could try to use that piece, whether it's to h3, whether it's trading off this bishop. I think at the end of a lot of lines here, White has the potential to be up a pawn in an endgame, and maybe Sorokin can still draw that position, but I think he's going to have to work hard here, and Baijinshi has demonstrated a lot of confidence when he's playing in these types of positions where you almost feel like he can't lose. And he's turned a lot of positions that have been dead draws. If we remember in this tournament, he played Grigory Kadanov in that equal pawn knight endgame and turned it into a win pretty effortlessly. He also had that game against Nicholas Theodorou in the last round. Bishop endgame, equal pawns, symmetrical, just like the Kaidanov game, turned it into a win. So again, we have a position, equal pawns, symmetrical. He's going to turn it into a win again? I don't know, Ben, but Baijinshi is definitely making a case that these slight advantages, comfortable positions, are his wheelhouse, and look for him to try to push this for a win today.
I really want to get that c-pawn off the board, the black c-pawn. What about a move like, let's try trading the bishops off, bishop g2. Is it possible? And then we trade the bishops off, and then we can pick up that pawn on c6, right?
Absolutely. No, bishop g2 is a move he'll definitely consider here. The only reason he's probably spending some time is you always wonder in positions where you know you're a bit better, where do I cash in? What's my best cash in right here? Is it trading the bishops, winning that pawn? Or is it actually more annoying for me to leave the bishops on the board, maybe pressure a bit more, trade them later? You have to decide whether black has any ways out, and maybe you want to keep the pressure for now or do it later. But if we imagine that this gets played, you're absolutely right, you're going to win one of these pawns. And this was the type of position I was talking about where maybe black has the hope to give up one pawn, get his rook active, play a rook endgame where you're down a pawn, but we all know that those have very good drawing chances. So something like in this position, he could play, okay, probably not c5. Let's go rook e7, activity. You never want to just sit there defending in a rook endgame. So let's say he does take this. The rook gets down, and this is an example of how that activity immediately pays off. Black gets a pawn back and survives this endgame. So you got to be careful when you play those moves like bishop g2 that you don't just give your opponent all this activity for nothing. So I think he wants to put the grips on, the stranglehold on the position, and then look to cash in a little bit later.
Well, another thing he might be looking at, you end this variation on the rook aiming for the a4 pawn, but if we go back to where we were, I suppose it's the live position.
Yes, this is the live position, bishop e4.
Okay, okay. So if bishop g2, can black just play bishop c2 and go after the a4 pawn and
yeah,
we're just even?
Well, bishop c2 is going to be well met by bishop takes pawn here. And unfortunately, I get to do two things at once. I get your pawn, I defend my pawn, really everything in my favor there. So it's actually in black's interest to go for the line that we were just talking about, where you trade the pieces as much as possible, go for that pure rook endgame, because the presence of bishops on the board is actually what makes this position so good for white. That's kind of why I don't want to trade the bishops off right away. I feel like that's actually the key to white's advantage. So I would be looking for, and no doubt Baijin is also considering, ways to keep that bishop on the board, apply the pressure, maybe improve his king, improve his pawns. He sort of seems like he has time to work. Black's a little bit tied up, defending this pawn, bishop in the middle of the board. Maybe later on you can trade those bishops, but it seems like he can make some small improvements first and then trade later.
Very well. These players are going at it for a lot of money on the line for a tournament like this. Let's take a look at our prize funds. First, in Group A, $22,000 total on the line, and the champion leaves with $6,000. And Group B is very generous as well, $14,000 total, put up by the St. Louis Chess Club. First place, the champ, leaves with $4,000. Okay, so now that we've glanced at our key matchups on paper, let's look at some more key matchups. Right. And I know Eric Hanson has played a stunning sacrifice, a knight g2 move, just seemingly giving up the knight. We've got to take a look at this game.
Yeah, no, this game looks like one to focus on, as well as the fact that this is a matchup between leaders. We mentioned we have so many potential key matchups today, Ben.
3 of them.
Because we got a 6-way tie. And, as fate would have it, they're all playing each other, which is fantastic for today's round. I was mentioning before the broadcast that we don't have any games finished. And that's because these games are all so tense. They're all between leaders. Eric Hanson playing with the black pieces against Ray Robson. And let's just jump back a little bit so we can see exactly what happened and why white's kingside seems to have just disappeared from the board here, Ben. Knight g3 was played by Ray, as we see. Just back up a little bit to show you guys, this is a pretty standard position that you might get from Rui Lopez. You'll see both players actually going for this typical maneuver of bringing the two knights over here. Black's knight came like that, and white's knight came like that. So d5 was played, d4 was played, and both players immediately get rid of the center pawns. And then that means, since it was Eric's turn to move, he said, okay, I'm going to start rerouting all my pieces over here. And we can see everything sort of aiming at that king side. Bishop c2. What's that bishop doing on a4 now? Absolutely nothing, so it's getting right back into the action. Queen f6. Knight g3, and hello, knight takes g2 played. Now we have to see exactly what we make of this move, whether it's a very good move, whether it's a speculative sack. We'll have to see. Ray's treatment was, okay, got to take it. That's a no-brainer. Can't let that knight go to g2 and just, reach his hand in the cookie jar, take that pawn, jump out. Not happening.
Well, this is going to be one heck of a sacrifice. The only reason you're moving your knight to g2 is to simply attract the king to g2. He's got to have a lot of firepower here.
Yeah, knight h4 played, king h1. Now, why did the king go to h1? I believe that the move king g1, you'd be faced with all sorts of firepower here. With bishop takes d4, that knight comes into f3. We do lose that rook on e1. And at the end of the day, there's also bishop takes h3 to consider. So there's a lot of things that actually concern me here with White's position. He decided king h1. He says, you can have this pawn on f2. And why did he do that? Because he intends to play rook g1 and trade queens. He thinks that if he gets the queens off the board, that the resulting position is going to be maybe 3 pawns for the piece. But those are very imbalanced positions. The problem for Eric is that once the queens were forced off the board, he was able to play queen g1, knight f3. So you might say, oh, wow, queen's off the board, no more attack. But what Eric was able to do here is create enough
And it's worth
pressure.
noting that the knight cannot take the knight on f3 in that position because there's an absolute pin.
Yep. No, that's a great point. Eric doesn't have to play this. If he had to play this, what we'd be looking at, 3 pawns for the piece. That's, when it's a middle game, there's still 4 minor pieces on the board for White. You got to be careful of positions like that. I think that White actually, or whoever has the extra piece in that case, has a lot to play for, probably winning. If you get to an endgame with 3 pawns for the piece, then maybe the 3 pawns are more valuable. In this case, though, there was no way, seemingly, for Ray to just exchange the queens. Very nice tactic here. Queen takes g1, king g1, and as Ben pointed out, knight f3, some sort of incredible move that you can't take because this knight is pinned to the king, and black is going to reclaim that queen on d2. And then in this position, I think we did have a move, and this is our up-to-date position. Rook to h1 played. The time is about even for these players, 16 minutes apiece, and a wild position. Eric has 3 pawns and 1 rook for 2 knights. Now, without thinking much here, that is generally very good for black. So I would say Eric is better here. Now, what he has to be careful of, and what Ray is going to be playing for, is the activity, the compensation. The fact is there are 4 minor pieces on the board, and there's a black king which has some threats to deal with. If you play g6, looks normal, he's actually going to be facing maybe some dark square issues. Trying to get that bishop in, knight e4, threatening knight f6. So there's still a lot of play left in this game, Ben. But I think objectively, those 3 pawns, plus the rook for the 2 pieces, more than enough. Black should be very happy with how that sacrifice turned out. But, practically, from a human perspective, you can still make a lot of threats with 4 minor pieces on the board for Ray Robson here.
To negate the threat of bishop takes h7 or rook takes h7 straight away in the current position,
right?
Would you recommend an alternative to g6, h6, or something else?
Well, all things considered, g6 should not be that bad of a move because let's not forget, we do have a dark square bishop. So it's not like we're exposing our dark squares with, nothing to cover it. There's always the idea that this bishop can hopefully reroute. However, if you play h6, then you also have to put up with maybe the idea of a knight coming into f5. And now the g file might be scary. If in this position, let's imagine I play the move knight f5 or something, rook g1 is coming next, and there's more threats, right? So g6 is nice because then if you switch to the g file, there's no more threats. My pawn on g6 is kind of a rock there. But if you play h6, I'm worried that the play switches to the g file. Maybe you have to play g6 as well. And if I'm going to play g6 and h6, then I start to get worried I'm moving too many pawns in front of the king. So maybe the action switches there. We actually see in the game, we have moves developing. He's gone for h6. So will we see Ray start to operate on the g file here? The good thing for Eric is that in the event of knight f5, if he decides to take it, White has to take with the bishop. He can't use that knight even though he'd love to, and we're going to see moves like rook d8, rook e8 very, very quickly. So I think this is still a very complicated position, but definitely I give the edge to Hanson here with 3, let's be honest, 3 connected pass pawns. They haven't moved yet, but they will soon. And the closer you get to an endgame, probably the more pieces you trade off, as long as Eric never, let's give an example. Let's say he plays bishop takes. this is probably not what I would do, right? You're giving away the 2 bishops, and you gave away both your bishops for 2 knights in the last 2 moves. This I don't like. But as long as Eric keeps a bishop on the board, so he can watch those key squares, I think that long term this definitely pays off for Hanson against Ray Robson as he gets up from the board there, as the players have about 15 minutes apiece, and a very, very interesting sort of imbalanced position ahead as we have 2 pieces for a rook and 3 pawns.
I know you and Eric stream quite often, and the Chess Bros in general. Has he been streaming this week?
We've been streaming a little bit. We've actually had the stream active as well, not necessarily from us, but that's why it's nice to have a team behind you to make up the slack, because Eric's been, he's been busy focusing on the tournament. So we managed to stream a little bit, but not as much as we're used to.
Do you think that keeps him sharp, or is it just to unwind and have some fun, or both?
I think a bit of both, but it's also very fair to say that the opposite may be the case. You play too many blitz games, you play players that are a lot weaker maybe than the ones you're playing in this tournament. That can have the opposite effect and maybe dull your senses a little bit. So I know, personally, and I think it's true for Eric as well, that he likes to stay pretty sharp during these tournaments. Doesn't like to play too many casual games, blitz, bullet, rapid even, just mostly focus on the games and the players in the tournament ahead. So I think he likes to stay pretty fresh. We've been streaming, and that's mostly just to have fun and sort of relax and have a diversion from the tournament.
Well, that's always good to have. Be sure to check out Chess Bros on Twitch for more on the Chess Bros stream. Let's glance over at Group B. I want to take a look at Grigory Kadonoff versus Sergey Ehrenberg.
Right.
Now, Kadonoff is one of the players sitting in second place, the time for second place, because we know this is the Baijin Shi show. But where are we at in this game? Actually, I got to say that these two have actually played once before, but it's one of those situations, ancient history, the 2005 Aeroflot Open, and Ehrenberg was victorious, same colors. So this is their second meeting, and Ehrenberg is away from the board.
No doubt they, the players are obviously have that 2005 game coursing through their blood right now, as the revenge is on the mind of Ehrenberg here.
Of Kadonoff.
Kadonoff lost.
Yeah, Kadonoff lost.
Ah.
Yeah, I'm sure if we could see his eyes, see the revenge.
Yeah, you could see the reflection of 2005. This doesn't look like a position that Kadonoff wants out of the opening. Ehrenberg here is sitting pretty with the 2 bishops, but most importantly, they can disappear at any moment. Knight takes g6. What I'm excited about for black is the fact that this bishop, even if there's not a bishop pair, that bishop is the strongest piece on the board, no question. Very, very nice pressure on the f2 square, and we have to take a look at Kadonoff. What has he done with his kingside structure? He, earlier on in the game, played the move g4, and what that means is that long term, all these dark squares around the king here, Ben, are completely weak, and let's imagine that in this position, knight takes g6 is played, just to illustrate. Queen c2 maybe, defending this pawn. After a move like queen e5, we've got ideas like bishop there, queen comes down to h2. We have moves like queen f4, hitting that pawn on f2, g5, just fixing everything, and I think this could be like a dark square clinic on the king side. Not to mention, Ehrenberg, with the pawns over here, not only does he have, in this position, 1 extra pawn, but he's also got the potential for 2 connected pass pawns to develop on that queen side. So this looks like a fantastic position for Ehrenberg, and I think he's just much better here.
What's the real concern of Sergey getting a queen down to h2 if he's able to stack that bishop behind it? Because it looks like white's still going to be safe. Move over to f1, and what damage is done?
No, absolutely. This, on its own, not enough. King goes to f1, and just like you say, white is actually completely safe there. If I combine a few ideas, though, then I maybe start to get a little scared. Specifically, I would probably start by targeting f2, and that sort of puts white in a bit of a bind here. We may tie down the queen and king to this pawn, and I feel like I need to use my rook as well as my pass pawns here. But long term, what you're going to have is the idea of, well, I've got these queenside pawns you need to deal with, and I have that queen h2 idea, attacking the king, and once I start to divert your attention on both sides of the board, then long term I think that becomes difficult to deal with. But you're definitely right, on its own, queen h2, not enough. But we'll see Sergey Ehrenberg, I think, increase the pressure here, as Kadonoff has to decide, is he going to take that bishop on g6? If he doesn't, let's not forget, Ben, that these are the two bishops you're dealing with here. I think black has a comfortable edge here.
All right, very well. And this is the live position?
Yes, this is the live board, and it's actually Kadonoff. You can see him there thinking, what is he going to do? Is he going to play knight takes g6, get rid of that bishop? Because maybe the idea is bishop takes e4 in the current position, so he's got to deal with that one way or the other.
All right. I'm glancing at our very active YouTube chat today. Digby Mooney says, is this stream on Twitch? This one is actually not on Twitch. The Spring Classic is only being sent out to YouTube and Facebook. And another player is asking, where can I see, or another viewer is asking, where can I see the
I like that.
ratings for these
You said
players?
another player, right? That's good.
He's probably a player, too.
He probably is a player.
Yeah.
If he's watching the St. Louis channel, he's obviously got that chess bug, the addiction. He's probably watching the videos and getting into chess, so that's a fair assumption.
Right. True that. Michael Impigne, who has been joining us, I think, every day. I see his name. Is very active. He's saying the player ratings are on the board. I'm not too sure about that, but if you want to see the player ratings, check out uschesschamps.com. There's a cool little module there from Chess24. Our video is embedded right in there. You just keep the chat window open in another tab, and you'll be set to go. Okay, so moving on. Any other games? Are any other games catching your eyes? How about Var Akopian as black against Rustam Kazimzhanov? This is Group A action right here. Var looks like he is in pretty good shape. It looks like there's a battle for the C file. What's going on here?
Yeah, no. This looks like he's either dead lost or he's in fantastic shape. Because when you got that knight there, he's either pinned, right, and he's just losing a knight. I don't think that's the case.
There's a bishop lined up with the queen, too.
Right. I don't think that's the case at all. Or he's just winning. He's got that connected, let's be honest, protected, pass pawn on d5. That's usually a game winner. Also, pawns on light squares, dark square bishop for white. It seemed like in the last couple of moves, we'll just show the liquidation here. After b3, bishop b5, that is a hero b pawn there, right? We got two connected pawns on the queen side. One pawn is saying nope, you guys can't move. And if you can't move those pawns at all, you're facing an equally tough position. It actually caused Kazimzhanov here to play a4, b4, exchange, and play queen takes a3. So this was something that Kazimzhanov decided to go for. That's why I have to give it an extra thought, because you don't just give up a pawn for nothing unless your position is really that bad. So what's his idea here? He has got two pins, and Var has to decide how he's going to deal with this position. Offhand, it strikes me as, there's no way that Black's just losing here. It doesn't feel right. Var's position looked good the whole way, and it would be crazy to think that there's a tactic here that just wins. However, we can definitely show exactly what Kazimzhanov is thinking. So, for example, one way to get out of the pin, let's say, might be knight a6. So we're hitting this rook. We're also hitting the queen. There's a few moves here for white. First of all, if rook takes, maybe I would just play...
Well, and the bishop can't take because then it's mate, right?
It's not quite mate, but I think this is the wrong path for black, because you're faced with this bishop. You always got to deal with bishop here as a threat, and maybe just rook here and rook down there and just win that bishop, threaten mate. So I think this is the wrong way to do it, but if we play rook takes rook here, then I start to thinking, so now if you take the rook, I will take this, and now this is fine for black because he lost the whole rook in that exchange. If I play queen takes e7, it's also important to remember, first of all, this is hanging with check, but a nice trick is that the rook always has that square to come back to, guarded by the queen. So you never get back rank mated or anything like that in these lines. So even here, queen takes e7. First of all, this is an idea, but again, I like this. Rook takes, rook e8, and I think you cover yourself here. So I think, for example, knight a6, that's just the first move that sort of caught my eye here. But it seems like that already gets out of the pin safely. And if that's the case, we're dealing with not necessarily a miscalculation by Kazimzhanov, but just a really tough position earlier. He felt that he needed to sack a pawn to get out of it. And we'll see if he can hold the resulting endgame position, because it seems to me like, based on initial calculations, Var Akopian is absolutely pressing here. And by the way, I find that very impressive. He's got his trademark French defense, and it has been very effective. He did actually beat Ivanchuk in the French earlier in the tournament. And we have this game where he might be pressing for the win. I mean, the French is not regarded as one of the top-tier opening choices, and, I mean, VAR continues to wield it very effectively. I think that's very impressive.
Actually, whenever VAR first came to St. Louis, before he actually lived here, but he was around here quite often, he seemed to be whipping up everybody's interest in the French defense. And this French defense became like a St. Louis opening. And if you come to St. Louis Chess Club, you're going to be playing against the French defense, so beware of that.
Be aware.
Okay, so Group B. What's next? What do we want? Baryshpolets, Theodoro. Shall we take a look?
Sure, yeah. The Theodoro game, we have... What is going on here? We got a couple kings with no clothes on, very standard. Looks like it came from some sort of King's Indian of sorts. Yeah, some kind of King's Indian position, right from the opening. And a bit of this is theory, but what we actually get in the middle game was a position where, I mean, both sides are looking at f4 and f5. Usually black is first in these type of things, but why can it not happen straight away? Well, because if I take, all of a sudden, don't forget that e-pawn is going to be a little loose from all the firepower that white's building up there. So he can't quite go for f5, but after a couple moves here, black says, okay, listen, you can take a pawn here. White just won a free pawn, but in exchange, I am going to get that f5 move happening, and then we're just going to see a very typical counterplay coming from that King's Indian defense of Nicholas Theodoro here. f5 takes. And white's up a pawn, but he's really missing that dark square bishop. And the developing position after f4 really starts to get exciting here as the players are down to about 10 minutes apiece. And we see a very common idea, which is f4. You take, and no, I don't take right back, which would maybe allow the knights to come in or something. But instead, you just leave that pawn there and go bishop to g4, putting a lot of pressure on these three pieces here. You got the rook hitting the knight. And you also got that queen looking to join the attack on the diagonal, maybe shuffle the king over and bring a rook to g8. Black has a lot of long-term attacking options, but again, white is up that one pawn, and you can't just force a checkmate to happen. It doesn't work that way.
You said that f5 shouldn't be played because then e5 is really weak. What has changed about the situation that allows this for Nicholas?
Well, it's not so much that e5 is a weak thing in general. It's just in the exact position where I mentioned it, there was a bishop sitting here, there was a knight there, and there was a rook here. So there was three pieces adding pressure to e5. What changed was white played bishop a3, and then black played knight b4 and said, okay, you can take a pawn, but suddenly your bishop's not there, your queen's offside, then it's time for f5 by black. So, no, e5 is not necessarily weak, but it was just hanging, basically. So he needed to find a way to make that move without the pawn being hanging, and white sort of gave him that option. He moved his bishop, black had to give up a pawn for it, but he considered that worth it, and now we're experiencing the compensation here, as black is all in on this attack. Rook takes f4, knight sinks into e6, very, very annoying. Usually what happens is this knight goes to g3 in these positions, if needed, just a very solid way of dealing with the king side, plugging up the g-file. And if black has to take that knight, believe me, it looks like here, that's a big fork on these two pieces. If he has to take that knight, and he does in the current position, takes with the rook. Why? If he took with the bishop, I was just about to say, I mean, not only is there knight takes f4, but even positions where pawn takes, I mean, these light squares are very, very weak here. So Baryshpolets seems to be doing well in his position, but we will see the counterplay continue to develop, as in the current position, after black just sacrificed the rook, he's got to continue with just as much firepower. And with the rook hanging here, I'm wondering how he's going to do that. I have a feeling that already this is just a very, very good position for Andrey Baryshpolets.
Andrey Baryshpolets, the former Group B champion in our seasonal classic series, plays for Ukraine. I understand we do have a result, our first result of the day in Group B. It was our key matchup, as Bai Jinshi and Alexei Sorokin have drawn their game. It was a rook endgame. We were able to glance at it a little bit earlier. Right. How did it end?
Right. It actually, he did exactly that. He did exactly bishop g2. Now, the move honestly surprises me a little bit, but maybe he was faced with the idea of bishop here and didn't want to deal with bishop takes a4, because one thing is true, after bishop g2, I do not think there's anything to play for. He probably had an even smarter way. Okay, he played rook here, very similar to what I was mentioning, that as long as you get active in those rook endgames, you're never too worried about dropping material, and yeah, these guys agree to a draw here in a fairly dry position where black is going to reclaim that pawn on c5. Both kings just can't join the action, and dead even material. So Bai Jinshi with the white pieces, I mean, he's got such a cushion on top of the tournament. He does not need to win games anymore, but he's going to take his chances when they come, and didn't seem to be presented with any today, so he accepts a draw against Sorokin and maintains his lead in the tournament.
Just a spectacular performance by Bai. +4 in this event. An amazing 5 out of 6. And we're already saying he's probably going to win this thing. And
Right.
we've got 3.5 rounds to go. So
He's a front runner for sure.
Right. Let's hop on over to Group A and check out Ilya Nizhnik's game against Aryan Tari, Ukraine versus Norway. And these are two of the front runners in Group A.
Right. This is another matchup between leaders. We have the last move rook c2 played, and I see that big time advantage for Nizhnik because black hasn't played his 40th move yet. So black is about to hit move 40, get that 30 minutes extra time. So these guys will not be in any time scrambles. But right here, it looks like if anyone's pressing, that's got to be Ilya Nizhnik. However, these knights can also be clumsy. While black's position may look like, there's knight d6 in the position to worry about, Tari has to deal with this. But at the same time, long term, that pawn on h4 is completely gone. So white is sort of playing the position a little more tactically. He's threatening knight d6 right now, which would win the exchange on c6. And Tari has that move to deal with. Now, if he can deal with that, that h-pawn is falling, and maybe black is doing well. But I think this is a very difficult move to face right now. Knight d6. Threatening check and the rook on c6. So what does he do about that? The answers are you either get your king out of check, and the only square to do that is king d8. Not usually a place I'd love to put my king here. And the other way is just to protect the rook, but I don't see a way to do that either. Maybe rook c5 or king d8. These are the only moves that come to mind here. Neither of them are moves I really want to play. So maybe there are other moves, but Nizhnik is getting up from the board there. I don't think time pressure is going to be any part of this game, not for a long time at least. And again, if Tari can sort of maintain the idea of surviving this one big threat, then, like I mentioned, knight g6 or just bishop takes h4 are moves on the horizon. But I think Ilya is doing well here because of how well his king is placed in the middle of the board. That king activity is very meaningful in the endgame, and we also have this pawn advance pretty far up the board. The only thing is that these knights sometimes can be a little clumsy. They almost want to jump into the exact same squares, so they're kind of bumping into each other. But knight d6 is the biggest threat. I think that king d8 and rook c5 can be considered. If knight d6 breaking the communication, thankfully bishop d6 renews that, and you do not lose material, but Tari has a big threat to deal with here as he faces knight d6 intended by Nizhnik.
All right, very well. We'll keep an eye on this game. Another one we haven't looked at yet in Group B is Christian Kirilla versus Alexander Mistah. Kirilla has just offered a queen trade. They're even on material, it looks like. Should black accept a queen trade?
Well, I think the bottom line here is that Kirilla's position is not good. That's for sure. We have a flankerot knight, and you do not see that too often for a good reason. The knight cannot go to f4 or h4. It looks like a very nice move was played at some point. In fact, it was just played. Last move, g5 is a great move. And it just completely dominates this knight, has nowhere to go. Long term, you have this bishop arriving to f3, and if that rook ever gets down here, it's just game over. So you got to be really, really careful here. If you're Kirilla, I think a queen exchange is fine. I think declining a queen exchange is fine. The black's position is probably going to be good in either case. Which one is better here is the question. Queen e7 looks like a very reasonable move. Keeping the queen on the board, maybe ideas like queen out here. Now, what do you run into with queen e7 is maybe the idea of rook d6. and suddenly white is saying, well, I'm actually going to pin your knight, and this is not so comfortable for you. So there's a few ways to look at this. Queen e7 is the move I want to play, but queen takes d4 is also something I think black can be very comfortable with, as I'm looking forward to the endgame. Kirilla is saying that I've got this bishop on c4. It's plugging the c file completely, so rook doesn't get in, and there's no other ways in except the d file, but thankfully white has got complete control of that for the moment.
If the queen moved to e7 and then the rook moved down to d6, as you said, could black play rook to d7?
Absolutely, rook d7, and I think that, I mean, although the pawns are even, we have to remember that white does have these double isolated pawns, so I do prefer black probably in any position, really, any endgame, any fair trade of pieces. So if rook takes, then probably black would have to decide between queen, bishop takes. Let's say he goes queen takes. Even in a position like this, I think black is doing fine, but Kirilla trading all the pieces, maybe he thinks he has chances in the endgame. It's really hard to tell because you trade too many pieces. Don't forget, that's an outside passed h-pawn that white just can't match, right? There's no way to make a pass pawn over here. So I think the endgames are bad, and I think Kirilla is going to be doing some suffering here in this game for sure. He's down on time. He's got 10 moves to make with 3 minutes to play, and rook c5 has just been played by Mistah, so he's okay with the queen trade. He just wants it to be on his terms. He didn't want to deal with rook d6 maybe in this pin, so he's saying, look, we can trade queens, but you know, it's got to be on my terms.
All right. Well, we see that Mistah is definitely in the driver's seat here.
Yep, that's for sure.
What game have we not seen yet? Ivanchuk and Bach. How about in Group A? I think that's our last Group A game that we have yet to glance at. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's this one, and the one thing about this, position is that earlier on, I'll just jump back to the move g5, which I thought was really fun. When we see g5, we know that black is thinking about the attack, and it's actually really hard to deal with for Ivanchuk, whose queen and bishop have sort of been relegated on this side of the board, and it's kind of crazy. Both of these pieces are just entirely out of play. Look at that queen, look at that bishop. You want to play c4 to, get that bishop on that diagonal. It makes so much sense, but c4 seems to always run into maybe knight d4. Suddenly the queen joins from c6. Let's not forget that takes on h4 is a very big move. And you can't take that pawn because queen h3 arrives very, very quickly on the board. And that is not necessarily a checkmate, but very close to it. And you don't want your king on the run like that in the middle of the game.
You have to have your king coming out to f3, I think.
Exactly. Now that doesn't look proper. That doesn't look proper.
That's no good.
No. So you can probably survive there, but the calculations, I mean, black's on the attack. At the very least, there's something like a perpetual here. And again, with these pieces not even part of the game, it seems like that seems incredibly risky to undertake. So he went bishop c1, and he said, look, you can take that pawn. I've got your rook hanging here, and I would say, honestly, a nice reroute by Ivanchuk here, bishop c1. I didn't like the bishop on this diagonal because c4 was always met by knight d4. And what it means is that the bishop joins on e3 nicely, and honestly, I do like Ivanchuk's position. If he can take here, create some threats, the bishop is on a much, much better diagonal and square on e3. So it really comes down to, can this queen finally join the action from b3? Benjamin Bach has compromised his king side so much just to get this attack going with g5 that now if it doesn't pay off, Ben, that's long-term weakness, right? Where's your g-pawn? It's just missing. And white's king is actually surprisingly safe here. So with 30 seconds ticking down, what move are we on? 26 here. Move 26. He's got so many moves to make before time control. Ivanchuk is strolling around the room while he's in time pressure. So I think Benjamin is going to have to play some very, very quick moves here. This doesn't look comfortable for Bach at all.
Now, some people out there might be saying, oh, you get 30 seconds to move, though. So you have plenty of time. It's not really 1 minute left. I mean, what would you say to somebody like that?
Well, it's kind of crazy, the feeling that you get when you're in time pressure versus when you're playing blitz. Because when you're playing blitz, you get down to a minute. That's a lot of time. That's like a third of your clock. And you have that confidence, and you've been playing fast the whole game. But it's when you get that pace shift. You've been thinking long and hard every single move of the game. Suddenly you have a minute. That's not a third of your clock. That's a way, way different proportion. And you've been playing so slowly that suddenly every move you make has to be quick. And it's just that sudden pace shift that throws you off. And believe me, having 1 minute in a classical game somehow just never feels the same as having a minute in a blitz game or a time scramble, because you're just not used to it. You've been sitting there for 3-4 hours playing slowly, and it can be really nerve-wracking to all of a sudden be required to play immediately.
Yeah, it's how you perceive the time.
Yeah.
In that environment. Okay, and our last game that we will look at for the first time in Group B is Hieden Steingrimson versus Dennis Kadrich, Iceland versus Bosnia.
And
there's a wall of pawns there.
There is a big wall here. This looks like a King's Indian if I've ever seen one, Ben. Knight B4 was the last move. We have to do a bit of counting here. So what's going on? We have a rook for a knight and a pawn is what it looks like. Rook for knight and a pawn. White has this, obviously really nice pawn chain. Black does as well. You can anchor that knight on the c6 square, but I have to feel like Dennis Kadrich has this position really in his favor here, because the white king is always going to be in a mating net. I mean, that's like a permanent thing. Unless you sort of run out here, staying in the corner there, if you take, if you push, it doesn't matter. That is a long-term mating net that you're stuck in. There's no way out of that, so you always got a checkmate on the back rank to worry about. You got this diagonal, which is lethal. White is missing his dark square bishop, and that bishop on e3, usually, or f2, that often holds the whole position together. And if I back up a little bit, be curious to see where that bishop went, but it looks to me like this pawn structure sort of compromised that bishop. Yeah, it was here. He actually played bishop b6 voluntarily. Took here. Now, he actually won a pawn as a result of that, but we can see the resulting position. That rook running out of squares, he didn't even have time to play rook back. There would be rook takes b5, 2 pieces for the rook. So actually, his whole idea of bishop to b6, I think it fell flat on its face, because you never want to give up that bishop. Although he did win a pawn, he had to give up his rook for a knight right after, and then the resulting position. I think this is all Kadrich here, as I think Kadrich has been... he's had a few losses in this tournament, maybe in a row, I'm not sure, but I seem to remember him having a few tough games recently, and so he is looking to bounce back with potentially a win here against Hieden Steingrimson, as player's down to about 6 minutes, and I think this is all in Black's favor. He just played the move knight a7. There's no entry into the king side for White, so everything is just on the queen side. Black's got the rook swinging over, and I mean, this pawn is hanging here, and like I said, you got to watch out for queen a7 on that diagonal, the a file, the c file, the b file as soon as that pawn is captured. I think this is all Kadrich here, as he definitely has the advantage here, looking to push for a win.
Are the knight on e6 and the bishop on f8 just kind of meant for each other? Neither is ever going to move again or be liquidated off the board. Does Kadrich want to improve the bishop? What's going on here?
Yeah, I think Kadrich wants to improve the bishop, because you can always play bishop e7, which contributes to guarding this pawn, guarding that pawn, and just getting off the square in case White ever wants to take you. I don't think either player is, like, Black would love to have that trade. Why? That knight on e6 is White's best piece. I mean, there's no question there. So I think that Black's not worried about knight takes f8, but at the same time, if anyone can improve their pieces, imagine that Black gets that bishop to b6. Just imagine. That would be amazing. That bishop on this diagonal is extremely dangerous. And don't forget, Black can switch to the attack at literally any time and just play the move h3. If he swings the rook over here and gets that queen over, I mean, h3, and suddenly White's getting mated all over again. So I wouldn't be surprised if White actually plays the move h3 himself pretty soon, just to get rid of that threat. But this knight is White's best piece. He never wants to trade it. Black can maybe try to improve the bishop, but again, that's a scenario that's in Black's favor, where he's not worried about the exchange, and he's the one who can improve his minor piece. That knight on e6, it's not getting any better.
All right. Well, that is it for Group A and Group B. So now let's go back around and take a look at Kazimzhanov versus Var Akopian. And it looks like Akopian's advantage has grown. These two have played before, but this is their first classical encounter. They have had 2 draws at the 2017 World Rapid Championship and at the 2017 World Blitz Championship. 2 draws total, that is.
Yeah, I mean, basically it went exactly as I said, Ben, and I'm surprised that it did because the lines that I was recommending seem to be completely lost for white, and it seems that they've followed that. Knight a6 by Var, queen takes e7, but maybe there's simply nothing better here. Like, white's position is that bad already. If we want to make a move here with the queen that defends the rook, let's imagine what one that would be. Well, queen a2, hello, knight b4, and pieces are falling here. So I really don't know what Kazimzhanov was calculating with that whole sequence of moves earlier that put his queen on a3, because knight a6, this line is what I mentioned, rook e8, and you're covered here. There's nothing, there should be nothing to worry about. He's going for it with f5, but I for one do not believe this. Yeah. Knight f3, I tell you, Ben, if this works, this is the strangest forced continuation I've ever seen. I don't believe in this. I mean, you can take this. You have a, what do we have? Queen for a rook and a bishop here. Kazimzhanov is going for the hold on the dark squares, and it's definitely menacing here. And the knight on a6 hasn't joined the action, but I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that this is 100% winning for Var. And
Var has taken the rook, and white takes back. And now
right.
The black king is advanced.
King e7. I mean, there's no check with the rook. There's queen checks coming. This knight will activate itself, or it might even stay there guarding the c7 square while black sort of arranges his pawns and maybe gets his king to safety. This is dead lost. Kazimzhanov is going down here.
And believe it or not, you know, you look at these two players, these aren't two of the 6 players in the lead right now. So I know that might be tough to believe, given the legacies that these two men have built over their careers, and they're not done yet. Any other games are standing out to you?
Well, the game of Ray Robson and Eric Hanson has developed quite a bit since last time.
All right,
so
Group
we can jump there and just say that on move 33, there's definitely some apparent time trouble for Hanson, but the simplicity of the position is very remarkable. You know, obviously, you're not worried about blundering things when you just have to make a move. So Hanson's not, you know, worried about blundering a piece, a tactic. He's got one full extra pawn here, and he's looking to push for a win. Whether he goes into rook endgame or not remains to be seen. He's got this knight pinned. We might see the move king e7. That seems very, very normal here. You can always take that knight later. I don't think there's a rush to do that right now. But if you want, it's always there. Bishop takes knight. So Hanson's in a very comfortable position. He's just played the move king e7. I think that's a great move. How did we get here? I'd love to just run through this quickly because what an imbalance that was earlier. Knight e4, and we see black playing just rook e8, and actually white bailed out with bishop takes h6. Ray was not a fan of sitting in this position with the two bishops disrupting his king. Rook d8 coming, and all of a sudden, like maybe f5, maybe c5, kick these knights in the center. This could be a very, very tough position for Ray. So he decides to bail out with bishop h6, but of course this is always going to be in black's favor, as the most you're going to get back are 2 of those 3 pawns, and that's what he did right here. After a few tactics, he was able to get 2 pawns back, but no more. And Eric is basically playing for the win here. We got a few more moves. King e7, rook e4 check, and king d6. So we'll see if this endgame is winning, but I think there are great chances here, as you know, basically Eric just has to make 5, 6 more moves, get to time control, then evaluate the position with that extra pawn. And I think he has great winning chances with the black pieces against Ray Robson. And that all comes from that weird sack where he gave up a full piece, and he ended up with a rook and 3 pawns for 2 minor pieces. Somehow it paid off for him in the end, as black is the only one who can win this game.
Can Ray unpin that knight at all? I mean, can't you move the king away and then like to the F file? Is it possible?
Well, that's the only way that he's unpinning the knight, really. Moving the F file or moving the E file. If he goes to the D file, he's going to lose the knight to C5. And if he, you know, I don't know. I mean, if he goes to the F file, yes, you unpin, but then I'm probably going to be really thinking about taking. If I take, you know you can't take with the rook. It's got to be pawn takes. And then all of a sudden my rook is free to maybe attack some of these other pawns. Maybe the king comes up. And don't forget, I've got this one extra pawn. It's a pass pawn. I can use it as a decoy in some lines, like go take my F pawn, I'll go take your queenside pawns. I think Ray has a really difficult defensive task ahead, and we see Hanson doing a very good strategy. Sometimes you repeat moves just to gain time before time control and hit that move 40 mark. But this is going to be This is going to be a long endgame ahead as Black is slightly better, definitely not winning, only one extra pawn, but Black has the only chances here.
Are you surprised that none of the games have ended decisively as of yet right now today?
I guess I'm not necessarily surprised they haven't ended yet, as all of the games, although they look crazy, they did look like they were going to go for a while. So we may see a lot of decisive results today, but they just may not happen straight away. As you know, at this point in the tournament, players are starting to tense up, and you're not going to see anyone just getting absolutely annihilated in like 20 moves. So these players, even if they go down, believe me, it's going to be a long struggle. Like especially this endgame, just as an example, if Ray loses this game, it's not going to be in 10 moves. It's not going to be in 30 minutes. I mean, it's going to take hours of grinding.
Eric just played King F6.
Yes, King F6, and I think what he's doing here, he realizes that's a pin, right, on D4, an absolute pin. That's going to stay there. So he's just saying, okay, I'm going to dance around with my king a little bit. He's got up to move 37. Once he hits move 40, then he'll do a real think where I think at the moment he's just passing time.
All right. And how about, let's see, what else do we have here? It looks good. Baryshpolets and Theodoro, we can revisit that in Group B.
Right.
And we thought that Nicholas was in trouble the last time we looked.
Yeah, and what has developed since then? Because what I see is actually that knight on e2 missing. And that guy was supposed to be the guy who held the fort together. I was going to put him on g3. So after this, yes, okay, it was bishop takes e2. That makes sense. Probably the right decision from Theodora. Although you're trading pieces, you maintain that dark square bishop. And when you have opposite color bishops, as long as you're attacking, there's still very good chances on the board. So we have this position, and I have a feeling with e7 check threatened, the king can slide to h1 or f1 to get out of this pin. Probably a better position for white, but man, this is this is always dangerous to be dealing with these types of positions because you get the feeling like there's some sort of attack that can always be unleashed. As long as there's no e7 check, just imagine knight f5, knight h4, that bishop on g2, pinned by the rook, is starting to feel very uncomfortable. But white's counterplay comes from the fact that in this position, e7 is a huge threat. There's also rook takes c7, and both of these ideas are pretty dangerous. So Nicholas has got to take care of them. They are on move 35, and we'll see if time pressure plays a big role in this game in terms of players blundering right at the last second.
I want to look at Group A right now, Jeffrey Zhang versus Liam Lee. This is what we said on paper was our key matchup of the day. These two have played once before, and they had a draw, same colors, at the 2016 Spice Cup Open at Webster here in St. Louis. And I know that Jeffrey has that pawn on the A file. What is your assessment since the last time we saw this game?
Well, definitely, I would say positive developments for Jeffrey. The king looks fairly safe at the moment, and the reason that bishop e8 had to be played was, I think, I'm not sure, but rook takes e4. I think we just play bishop d3, and that seems to work out. So he couldn't quite grab that pawn, which would be tit for tat. Take my a pawn, I'm attacking your e pawn, but he couldn't quite grab it, so he had to play this move bishop e8. Now this pawn is hanging. There's also bishop coming to c6. But at the end of the day, it looks like Jeffrey may just be escaping with an extra pawn here. The queen can come back, and don't forget we've got a protected pass pawn on the A file now. It's away from the action, the outside pass pawn. I think that's very, very relevant for Jeffrey here. Not to be undersold. That pawn is very dangerous. White's king remains safe for the moment, and I don't see how black's pieces infiltrate. That queen remains offside. I don't see how it joins the action unless taking on e4. But if white can deal with that, I'm worried that this queen just never gets in the action. For example, in this position, Ben, where does this queen go? I mean, it has to go to like e8 or something after moving the bishop, or it has to go to h6 and play g5. But that's just crazy with your king there. So I think that queen on g6 may be a real issue here because we have a situation where I've got a queen stuck on the king side, and I've got a pawn ready to run on the queen side. That seems like a bad combination. Maybe that a pawn will be very hard to stop. But trying to figure out how to defend his pawn here is Jeffrey Zhang. They have hit move 40 though, so time pressure not an issue in this game. As this is a game we definitely expect to go on.
Another game of note in Group A, Vasily Ivanchuk versus Benjamin Bach. There has been a pawn promoted. Ivanchuk has just promoted a pawn, but don't let that headline fool you because I think he's in trouble. The rook has just taken that. And, we have a result actually on another board, actually Group B. Andrey Baryshpolets and Nicholas Theodorou. Baryshpolets, as we thought, came out victorious, and they are signing the score sheets.
Right. No, that game did look like it was about to, I don't know if I would say about to finish, because I think Nicholas must have missed something in calculation there, but it did look like the move e7 check, as I pointed out, was very, very difficult to deal with. So yeah, this result doesn't surprise me, but I didn't think it would come that quickly then.
Yeah, right.
Seems like he just let e7 check happen and maybe just missed that in the corner, queen a8 check just puts him away there, as there's no way to cover his back rank.
Yeah, really, for sure. And I think we should get Andrey Baryshpolets down here, the former B champion. Great guy, though. Have you known Andrey before this event?
No, and I haven't had much of a chance to speak with him. So it'd actually be great to get him down in the studio if he wants to talk about his nice win here as he puts away Nicholas Theodorou and definitely improves his tournament so far.
Let's look over at Group B's Grigory Kaidanov versus Sergei Ehrenberg. They are about 4 moves away from time control, and they are both in trouble.
Well, what about that game that we didn't quite catch? Because the Ivanchuk Bach game, it looked like someone was going to lose that potentially. Like Ivanchuk here is basically, I think he's getting mated. Like queen h1 is checkmate, for example. Is rook f6. Does he have time to deal with this? I have a feeling that someone's getting mated here. So rook f6 has to be played. Yeah, it's on the board. Someone's getting mated here. If rook check, king g7, queen g8, king h6, where's the mate? Because otherwise it's white who's getting checkmated on h1. This looks very intense. Remember, Bach has been playing on increment this whole time. And Ivanchuk suddenly, he went kind of crazy. He moved his f-pawn, and he exposed his king a little bit. But in exchange, is actually both players' kings completely out in the open. Offhand, though, this doesn't look like white has a continuation. If I check, king g7, queen g8, king h6, I don't have another move. And this is checkmate in 1. And my queen is hanging. So that can't be it. If rook g8, king h6, if I take here, then just rook takes back. And again, there's mates everywhere. And if I take here, that's checkmate in 1. This doesn't look good for Ivanchuk, as this move, rook f6, kind of a desperado, just throwing itself to the defense of the black king, but it may actually be just a winning move, as down to 14 seconds is Ivanchuk.
That variation, one of the variations you showed there, I wonder if the white queen taking the rook on g6 is a computer move to disable the mate but cripple you. I mean, white is just...
Right. Here, you just take with the rook, though, and if you check, king up, check again, king up, again, there's just no checks. Remember what I said earlier in this game about how this queen on b3 was not in the action? That's been true the whole game, Ben. That queen hasn't done anything. I mean, it exerts pressure on this diagonal, but look at how black's pieces are just swarming the white king. I think Ivanchuk is dead lost. He must be mated here. He's going to throw in some checks, but with his time ticking down 5 seconds, I mean, we got to see a move from him.
I wonder if we can get a shot of the players and see what their status is here.
I mean, Ivanchuk maybe... I don't know if he's losing on time or if he did, oh man, with 3 seconds, I think he threw that check in. Rook e8 played on the board, king g7, queen g8, king h6, but now I think he's faced with a position that is losing. Rook e1 only move? Rook e1 must be the move here. You cover mate. Or sorry, I should say that's not necessarily mate anymore, but it's mate in 2. I think that's got to be played here.
Well, we might want to keep a look at this game. I understand that we do have Andrey Baryshpolets ready to come in for an interview. So I will bow out, and we'll get Andrey in here.
Absolutely. That sounds fantastic. That game just finished, as you saw, but this one is really heating up here. The reason that it's just going to slow down, though, is because they have just hit time control, as Vasily Ivanchuk somehow, crawls to the 40th move, and he does finally make time control. Will he survive this position, though? I don't know. It almost looks like mate on the board. Rook e1 appears to be maybe necessary to cover the checkmate there with queen h1. What can happen after this? All of a sudden it's, it's just rook g6. Yeah, rook g6. There's no check on f8. That's the issue here. Well, guys, this might be a win for Benjamin Bach. I mean, Vasily Ivanchuk is going to think about this as they've hit time control, but I think Bach hitting the queen, threatening mate, is going to win this game because rook e1 is the only move that I see here to actually stop this, idea from happening. Maybe we see some crazy move like rook e5, trying to hit this square so that after check, king g4, queen h5, something like that. It's really hard. I mean, rook g6 is there in every case, so I have a feeling that Ivanchuk might just be lost here. They've hit time control, and we're sitting in this position here. But with queen h1 check and queen h5 on the board, as well as rook g6, threatening the queen and the pawn. So if rook e1, rook g6 seems to put the game away for Benjamin Bach. So we'll have to see what happens there, but in the meantime, we're actually joined for an interview by Andrey Baryshpolets, who's joining us in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we just came off a win. We watched the conclusion of this one against Theodoro, although I have to say, it always feels pretty scary when you win some material or you win a pawn, but in these King's Indian positions, you can always maybe just get mated out of nowhere. So
yeah, exactly.
Did you feel like it was clean the whole way, or you were unsure at some points?
No, of course it was very tense. So I mean, I had a feeling that I was better, especially with pawn up. But still, as you said, like King's Indian, so positionally white is much better. But there's always those tricks. And after he played something like rook g4.
Right, near the end of the game?
Yeah, in the end of the game. So I was really unsure like where it goes.
Sure.
I just had a feeling that it should be still winning for white, but...
Well, why don't we just jump through the game from the start? Maybe we can skip to the important points and just give us your thoughts about how the opening went and maybe the middle game, especially when you had to give up your dark squared bishop. Felt like things got interesting. Yeah,
so c5 is already a rare move, rare reply to knight b8.
Right here, yeah.
Yeah, and this idea knight e8, knight x d6 looks interesting. So there are some lines like with knight on e7, like that. So
you mean if black had
played
knight
black
e7?
Plays like knight e7 instead of knight b8, this one.
Yeah.
So but anyway, I mean, position it's something between like King's Indian and Grunfeld with bishop g2. Yeah, so c d6 and actually I didn't expect knight x d6. I thought like c takes d6 looks
just
more natural,
CD,
and then f5 and some kind of standard play. But again, knight d6 also looks playable. Knight d6, e4, a5, I believe he played rook e1, knight a6. Yeah, and I had a feeling that this position should be better because I mean I played this both for white and black, and still I mean objectively it should be better, but of course black has counter chances. So.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, b3 looks interesting, so I thought that on b2 my bishop is...
it makes it harder for black to play f5.
Yeah,
and
exactly. So, and also I have bishop a3, like what happened in the game. So played bishop d7, bishop b2, queen e7, rook c1,
Okay.
So it's difficult to say like if all those moves are necessary or not for both sides, but I mean just a game. So queen
seems
d8,
logical.
Yeah, here I played knight a4. So I thought that this is the most concrete approach because if I play, let's say, knight d1, like the other idea, just to transfer my knight somewhere to c4 maybe. So then b6, and I don't have knight e3 immediately, right? So because e4 is hanging, so I need to spend some extra tempo, like queen c2, but I wasn't sure if it's what I wanted.
If you have that time.
Yeah, because I mean I'm just kind of wasting some time. So knight a4 was more concrete, so I'm just attacking right away. So b6 and bishop a3, and now I just have a threat of knight b6. So that's why he has to make some important decisions. So either to take on a4, but then I thought that position it just
should be good.
Looks
all
awful for black, and also knight on a6 is misplaced clearly. So knight b4 probably the best move. Actually I didn't expect knight b4. I thought like just I take the pawn and I'm just held the pawn up, but actually it turned out to be not that easy for me. So take on before, 8 before.
Giving up the dark square bishop is always a decision.
Yeah, but still, I mean, he hasn't created any counterplay yet, so I
Right.
thought like I just should be just pawn up.
Mm-hmm.
But then, okay, after I took on f5, g takes f5. Yeah, it turned out that actually my queen is misplaced on b4, so I'd better do something with it. But if I play queen d2, let's say right away, so then probably he has bishop takes a4, and I thought that here probably he has good compensation.
Right.
Just positionally, so he will play like maybe e4, maybe transfer knight to c5, so he has some options. So
Yeah.
that's why I
The extra pawn you have is sitting on a4 here, so it's
yeah,
a little bit different.
yeah. So that's why I played knight c3, which
Yeah.
looked like natural, and I thought like if he plays directly e4, then I always have knight d4.
Yeah.
And still I have some good chances like knight e2, knight f4, but what he can do, it wasn't clear. So he
Mhm.
cannot play f4 obviously because
E-pawn.
e pawn is fallen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but he played rook f7. I think that was
Mhm.
a good decision of him because here he's kind of threatening some lines to play bishop f8 even. So if, for example, I play knight d2 with obvious idea knight c4, then bishop f8.
Right.
Yeah, and I
that's
didn't
the
like this much.
misplaced
Yeah,
queen you were talking
yes.
about. Yeah.
So that's why I spent some time, and I thought like either to play queen h4 instead of knight d2. Yeah, here queen h4, but I wasn't sure if my queen is better placed on h5. Yeah, bishop
Right.
bishop f6, bishop queen h5, and here I wasn't sure if it's a good square for queen. So
Right.
still probably I mean the best plan for me is just to play knight d2 and queen e2 back.
Right.
So and then bring knight to c4 at some point. So because of all that, I decided to play knight e2.
Just so
Yeah.
your queen always
Yeah,
had
just
a
I have like
safer way
yeah,
back.
safer way back. So and I had a feeling that if I regroup somehow, so then like my long term is just to trade this knight on d6
Yeah.
and to convert this pawn somehow. But okay, knight e4.
Yep.
Also, he just kind of trying to mess things up.
Yeah.
Queen c4. And obviously, yeah, it's not that easy to play for black because I mean there is no like direct plan. So
Yeah, there's nothing immediate. Just
yeah, nothing
trying to mess the
immediate,
position.
Yeah,
up.
so just to wait, you know, for this opportunity to push either e4 or f or
Mhm.
like one after the other. So queens, bishop c8, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and here rook d1 maybe not the best move. So after I played it, like in a couple of moves, I realized that probably rook cd1 was better.
This one, yeah.
Yeah, because I have my rook on a1 clearly better placed than on c1.
Right.
Actually, I'm not pressing on c7 anymore, so he kind of defended.
Yeah, maybe don't need it there anymore.
Yeah, and rook c1, and also I can bring my queen via c1. So, for example, queen c1,
Right.
and then knight c3, and I just play normally.
Let's say, yeah.
Yeah, because I like my queen on this diagonal c1, h6, because sometimes I can have knight g5. So, for example, e4,
Right.
then maybe even knight g5 looks good. So
Mm-hmm.
if bishop h6, h4, so
Yeah.
looks good for white.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's why probably this was slight inaccuracy, this rook d1.
Right.
But on the other hand, I just didn't see like what to do, so I needed to protect this deep pawn somehow
Right.
with the rook. So rook d1, yeah, knight
d6.
d6. Yeah, and here queen b4. Here I realized that probably queen b4 going back is actually in this setup not that bad because queen c2 I didn't like because of bishop h6 at some point. So for example, maybe right away bishop h6.
Yeah.
Let's say rook b1 and probably white still is better, but here maybe he has something like e4, e3 or e4, f4.
Yeah. Well, this is
So-
the type of position where you almost wish the rook could.
Yeah,
go back
exactly.
to
So yeah,
the other
I
side.
just have one piece misplaced, and actually black has all the pieces in the game, so probably there's sufficient compensation here.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's why queen b4 looks kind
Correct
of-
one again.
Probably,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah, of course, it's
Hard to say.
hard to say because all of pieces on the board. And
Yeah, I'm sure it's very subtle differences.
yeah. So here he played f4, and I don't know. Otherwise, if he doesn't play f4, still not clear what he can do. So
Did you think that this was sort of the right moment for him to, whether it's the right move or not, just go for it with f4, or did this move surprise you?
That was. I mean, obviously, I felt that he just desperately needs to find some push like f4 or f4 e4. Basically, that's it. He doesn't have anything else. So if he doesn't do this, sooner or later, I just play like queen d2, knight c3,
Yeah.
and then slowly like maybe queen e2, knight d2, knight c4, and And
He has
that's
to
gonna
do
be
something
yeah.
before you do
So
that.
right, and he
Yeah.
plays f4 right in the moment when I don't have control over e4 square, so I pretty much have to take on f4. So if I had like knight on c3, so probably I could play knight e4. So like in some previous
Right.
lines, that was the idea. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I pretty much have to take on f4, and bishop g4 I thought the best move. So and that's why, I mean, that's how he shows me that my rook should be on e1. I mean,
Once
that's why
again,
yeah,
yeah.
rook e1 also looks like the only move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and here also I still had a feeling that this should be with large advantage for white, but obviously it became very unclear.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always something. I'm not sure about e4. I don't know. I thought maybe he can. Yeah, maybe he could take bishop f3, bishop takes f3, and here queen h4. Just kind of trying to do something positionally. So, but
Right.
still, I'm not sure if it's good enough for black to hold this.
Yeah,
but maybe it is.
looks
I mean,
annoying. It looks annoying.
yeah, it looks annoying because I mean, again, like his knight on d6 is excellent, so he has pretty much all the pieces in the game. So
Mm-hmm.
if I play queen d2, then maybe bishop h6 is a possibility. So king
Yeah.
h8, transferring rooks to g file. So
Yeah,
obviously
maybe
it
more
has to be
practical.
Yeah. So actually, I was more afraid of this.
Mhm.
And when he took, he played d4, knight g5. I mean, optically it looks completely winning for white, but then yeah. So knight e6.
Sure.
Again, for sure. I mean, I couldn't.
Yeah.
Play this. So d takes c6. So yeah, if I take knight f4, then rook h6. So
Yeah.
still he has some
Not necessary
some
to allow
annoying
this.
things. Yeah. And I thought take bishop e2 the best move.
If
because-
the knight gets to g3, it's probably
yeah
too
so,
much.
so he has to take.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and here after rook g4, I just realized that maybe I mean I had the wrong impression that I was better.
Right. Like somehow he can just sit in this position and you know.
No, actually, like I still have this pawn on e6, which is very annoying to him. So if not this pawn, probably he would have sufficient compensation. But here he needs to spend a lot of time to grab this pawn
Yep.
first. And
I was surprised watching at really how quickly the game finished from here because I thought that black had sort of established that okay, might be worse, but at least maybe he can try to play on with opposite bishops and control with dark squares. But the game actually finished really quickly from here.
yeah, so here he played
Queen.
I
Well, you
played
played queen
yeah,
d2.
that
Yeah.
was my move. Yeah, so queen d2. Actually, I didn't see anything better than queen d2
Right.
at this point. So yeah, because for example, I had the interesting idea like to play f4 here, which seems really cool. So just you know,
Right.
having this thing in mind. Yeah, but I didn't like c5, and then
Right, yeah.
he brings his bishop to d4, and now he has really good counterplay because he just can positionally play queen f6, take on e6, and with bishop on d4, he's probably not worse at
Yeah.
all. Yeah.
Right.
So this looks like. But still, I mean, maybe I'm wrong with that.
Maybe also, yeah.
Yeah.
But okay.
But again, I mean, just
Visually.
just practically, I didn't want to go for it. So
Yeah,
that's
that
why I
seems
decided
right.
that queen d2. I mean, I didn't see anything great. And here, queen f6, I was a little surprised by this move. So I calculated only queen h4.
by black, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed more natural because now he has queen h3, also bishop h6, and on queen h4.
Let's say the same.
Yeah, if queen
idea.
d5.
Because actually, it was remarkable, but this threat, like the game, was somehow really difficult to deal with.
Yeah, but I thought that here he has something, but now I just cannot recall it. Maybe
some rook g2. I don't.
well,
think.
rook g2, king g2, then queen g4, king f1, queen
kind of
h3,
running away,
king e1.
right?
Yeah, bishop c3, but then I just sacrifice back rook c3, queen c3, and then rook
Yeah.
d2 is a good move. Because otherwise, if I play queen d2, then surprisingly he can play queen e1, queen d1, queen c3,
Yeah.
and if rook d2, then maybe he has something actually. Yeah, so here's like one more precise move, rook d2. Yeah.
Yeah. If queen here, then maybe this you were
Yeah.
saying, but
Mhm.
rook d2.
Mhm. Yeah, and
still
it
got
looks
this.
it looks winning. Yeah.
So
So he doesn't have this rook g2, but maybe he has something like rook g5 or.
sure.
Actually, I just couldn't recall like what I didn't like. Maybe rook g5 actually. Yeah. And here if I play queen a8, then bishop f8. So
And this, it's not quite working because I guess he always has some rook takes
right.
g2 move.
Yeah, but probably. Oh, actually, yeah. Here, what I calculated rook e4. I mean, I was really happy with this move. Or, is it a good move
Liquidating.
at all? Yeah, it looks great. Yeah, because if he takes queen e4, I just take queen g5, if he begins with rook g2.
Mm-hmm.
Knight e4 doesn't work because of e7, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. Knight
So,
takes e7.
e7, yeah. And if he takes on g2 instead of taking on e4, then I simply take king g2 and queen e4, nothing better than that. And then I just have winning endgame, so rook c7.
Yeah, you have
So
rook
I
and
just have
also
like
the
three
a-pawn.
pawns, 3 extra pawns, and they should be easily winning. So.
Yep. Yep.
So I was happy with this line because at least I was sure that I'm
Yeah,
out of
if you
danger.
see
here.
the-
If I see that I can take pawn on e4 without any compensation, then
Right.
it should be winning somehow. But queen f6, yeah, maybe this is a strong move because
This is a pretty strong continuation. Just once the queen gets on d5, this threat is...
yeah, but it wasn't easy to calculate correctly all of that. So h3, I didn't like bishop h6, so that's why I spent like almost all the time I
All the
had.
time, yeah.
At this point. So, but I just didn't see anything better than h3. So if I play, for example, instead of h3, queen d5 immediately, then queen g6, and
It's covering the square.
yeah, covering the square, and if queen a8, then knight e8. So that's very important because it's kind of protecting the 8th rank with knight e8, and then
Right.
I cannot defend on g2. So
And some f3 move, maybe.
f3 here, maybe I missed f3. Oh yeah, maybe I just simply missed f3 because
Somehow holding,
Some-
maybe.
yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, if I hold my bishop on
Yeah,
g2, then
exactly.
I'm just easily winning.
Then it's
yeah.
winning.
Well, yeah, maybe I just missed f3 here. Yeah.
But then, I
Alright,
mean...
does he have anything better after queen d5? I
Yeah.
mean, like instead of h3, like in this position, queen d5.
Right, instead of this?
Yeah, because I thought that queen g6 is really great for him.
Well, yeah, it's really frustrating because all the all the ways don't seem to work. There's no way to just get the king out, or
Maybe like bishop
Just to
h6,
safety.
something to get the square on g7. But then rook c7. comes,
yeah,
so
then
always,
there's
yeah.
no immediate threat yet, right?
Yeah.
'Cause we always
So
have-
probably yeah, I have time to
right.
make some useful move. But
Well,
I don't know
it-
which one. Maybe
It's
rook-
still ended up finishing.
yeah,
pretty
here,
quick. You
Here
went for
h3,
this.
I was calculating bishop h6, so I thought that this
yeah,
was the main
that
line.
this was the main. the
Yeah,
main
and
move,
here
so.
bishop h6, and I believe that I had kind of the only strong move queen c3. Because if I play queen d5 here, then he can just take on g2, let's say, king g2, and
Queen f3
oh,
or-
queen f3. Oh, actually, queen f3 might not be that great. King g1.
Because we always have
Yeah, I
have this
have
one later.
Yeah, I have my pawn. So
Usually you can rely on e7 at the end
Yeah,
of most
right,
lines
right.
to work.
so like e7 and queen takes d6, something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, this kind of trick.
But still, it doesn't seem clear.
So you were probably surprised then by rook g6 because
Yeah,
it makes
rook-
your life a lot easier after
yeah,
queen
exactly,
d5.
because he doesn't have this idea with queen g6 anymore. So
Mhm.
and bishop h6, queen c3, that was kind of, I guess, a critical line because now he has something like rook g2, king g2, queen f3. But then again, I'm just ending up. I mean, not this one.
Oh, in bishop h6.
Yeah,
you
in
mean.
bishop h6 line.
Yeah, yeah. No, so that line was critical.
And I'm not
Bishop
sure what's
h6.
going on there. So.
Yeah, no, who knows at this point.
But I mean, it just felt like this should be winning.
Mhm.
But now I see. But doesn't he have queen g5? I mean, like if we go back,
Here?
h3, rook g6. Oh no, he played rook g6, right? I meant
Right.
like bishop h6, queen d5. Yeah, he has no time for queen g6 or anything like that.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and here queen d5. Actually, here I was very positive about my position. I thought like
I think you should be. Yeah.
well, but I thought
At,
like
at this point.
yeah, but here I thought that rook g5 was kind of the only move.
Right. Yeah.
Because I have really powerful queen.
But he was also in some time pressure at
Yeah,
this
well,
point.
yeah, some sort
I
of
guess it was
trouble.
mutual.
Yeah, he had like maybe 3 minutes left, so
Yeah.
not that much. So
Because I think I was looking at this position, and then all
yeah,
of a sudden
obviously he blundered or something like maybe he calculated queen 8 or something, but
Right.
but yeah, e7.
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't have any other move, so either I mate or
Yeah,
he mates
yeah,
me.
yeah.
So.
Either you give this mate or he gives
Yeah,
this mate,
right.
and obviously it just works out. The pawn's covering, and
Yeah.
everything is working here. So
Yeah.
I mean, this is a tense game. You mentioned it got a lot
Yeah.
scarier than maybe you thought, but in the end somehow it worked
yeah,
out the calculations.
But I was kind of expecting that it would be scary.
Yeah,
because
usually get
yeah,
that.
he's attacking my king, so I mean it's
what,
always
what
scary.
To do, what to do?
Yeah.
But a win is a great result. And
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
thanks for coming down to the studio and sharing your thoughts, and really appreciate it. Good luck in the rest
Yeah,
of the tournament.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's Andrey Baryshpolets and his very nice win against Nicholas Theodorou there in the B group. And that is the, there's a few more decisive games in the B group as well that just got announced. I think we saw Denis Kadrich won his game, which I was expecting from earlier. That position for Stein Grimson was not promising, and we see a forced mating net there on that board. Also, we had Sergei Ehrenberg with the 2-bishop position against Kadonoff. I mentioned earlier in that one as well that I was expecting a victory from Sergei. So in the B group, I think things are more or less as expected, and the game between Kirilla and Mistah is still ongoing, but a big advantage there to Alexander Mistah in the B group, which is the remaining game there.
All right. Aman, did you say that Jeffrey Zhang beat Liam Lee?
I didn't.
You see that
No,
result
I was
in
in
Group
the I was in the B group. I was in the B group mentality.
All right. Let's see how that game ended, if you don't mind, because this is potentially a really big result. I mean,
Absolutely.
we have the 3 big showdowns in Group A, and Jeffrey Zhang looking to break through.
We saw it around here, and I was mentioning that this A pawn is running. Black cannot take that pawn. He's got his queen trapped. I think all things in favor of Jeffrey's position, and simply A4, Benny. I mean, he's just going to run that pawn. So what ended up happening is Le Quang Liam, his queen just can't get out. It's just such a problem here. It's trapped in jail on the king side, and it means that just probably an easy conversion here for Jeffrey, who had to be a little careful on the light squares, but that king position on h7 is not going to stay safe forever, as rook f8, rook h8 is in the position. And just look at this domination. Queen here, where's the queen going? Queen d8, you don't even have g5. I mean, this is just like the worst kind of zugzwang to be put in. You almost have nothing to do. Queen g6, rook f8, and just a mating pattern there. If king f5, where is he planning to go? Probably something like rook to f8, or actually rook takes h5 is maybe just even nicer. And that's a nice checkmate there, g5 and take that. So that's what he was planning there, and Le Quang basically didn't have any choice because his queen was stuck the whole game. It was just no way out of that. So Jeffrey Zhang, with the white pieces, claims a win against the top seed in the A group.
You know, we are just 13 days away from round 1 of the 2019 U.S. Championship. And Jeffrey Zhang he's no stranger to the U.S. Championship, and he's won the U.S. Junior before, and he won the World Junior before. But I can't help but thinking that Jeffrey Zhang might be one of the dark horses this year.
I feel like he always is. You know, he's always dangerous in those U.S. Championships, and I think the best sign for him is that very clearly he's in good form. And you can always have an elo that you measure people by, but form is another thing that can be temporary. And right now, he seems to be playing very well, so he looks to maybe keep that momentum going forward.
You have the big 3. You have Wesley So, Hikaru Nakamura, Fabiano Caruana. You could add Linier Dominguez in there now, big 4. But Sam Shankland won it last year, and no one really thought he would.
Right.
Jeffrey Zhang.
Someone to watch.
Maybe. We
Someone
talked to
to
Sam,
watch.
I remember last year at this very event, the Spring Chess Classic.
Yeah.
And Sam was on here promoting his book. And we were like, well, good luck in the championship. But no one really thought he would do it. Jeffrey might be that guy this year.
He could very well be. He could very well be. I see the other big result in the A group was Benjamin Bach did beat Ivanchuk from that position that I was looking at right before our interview with Baryshpolets. And yeah, basically he just resigned on the spot after hitting move 40 because once again, there's only one way that I see to stop Queen H. Well, there's 2 ways. Queen H1 and Queen H5 is mate in 2. Rook E5 stops the queen from reaching H5. But again, after this, there's just rook g6 winning the queen. And the other way of doing it was after king h6, rook e1, stopping queen h1. But then rook g6 wins once again because of checkmate or the queen. So nice, kind of comeback victory from Bach. I'm not sure how his position was earlier. It looked a little loose, but at the same time, he went for it. G5, and he was attacking Vasily the whole game. And it's funny, Ivanchuk and Le Quang Liam both went down in their games because of a queen that was like way offside and just couldn't seem to join the action. So funny, a similar theme today as Benjamin Bach and Jeffrey Zhang both pick up some huge wins in the A group.
Right. Let's take a look at our standings so far in Group A. After 6.5 rounds, or 5.5, I guess, technically. And we see that Jeffrey Zhang, right now, temporarily clear first, but we had those 3 games between all 6 leaders standing at 3 points. Where do you think we'll be at whenever this day is done, Aman?
Well, it definitely but Akopian is going to win. So he's going to jump up to 3 points. That means that Kazimzhanov stays way at the bottom of the tournament at just 1.5. I think that we have a very good chance for Nizhnik and Tari to draw their game, which looks like a pretty equal endgame right now, but definitely still ongoing. I think the question is whether or not Eric Hanson is going to convert his 1 extra pawn rook endgame against Ray Robson. If he can, he's going to join the leader and be the co-leader with Jeffrey Zhang up there at 4 points. So I think that's the only question mark, as I think Akopian's going to win, Nizhnik and Tari probably going to draw, and can Hanson win to join the leaders?
And let's take a look at our B group results, our standings rather. And there's only 1 game left, and it's still the Baijinshi show, but it's not an absolute runaway, right? I mean, he could be caught.
Oh, absolutely. No, I don't think anyone feels like he can't be caught. He just needs 1 bad game, right? And then suddenly anyone can catch him. The game that's still ongoing, I would say, is really likely going to be Alexander Mistah winning that one. So that would mean that he jumps up to 3.5 points and jumps into 3rd position there. Alexei Sorokin, we remember, he was actually 0-2 to start off this tournament. Now he's up there in 3rd place. That is a full flip of the tournament. So he is kind of back on the horse. Andrey Baryshpolets, we had him in for an interview. He had a nice win today, and he is way up there at 4 points. So he's giving real chase to Baijinshi. And Baijinshi still has some tough opponents to go. So he will be on everybody's radar, trying to catch up to him.
Indeed he will be. Well, of course, we're going to be back here tomorrow for round number 7. And the games begin at 1 p.m. Central Time at uschesschamps.com. Remember, though, we are on the air with you 2.5 hours later at 3:30 p.m. Central. But tonight, the action continues here on the St. Louis Chess Club YouTube channel. If you're on Facebook, go to the YouTube channel. At 6:30 p.m., Caleb Denby steps in to host Viewer's Choice, submitted by viewers like you, to our email address that we give out during the class. We can't give it out to everybody, though, because then we'll just get inundated by bad games. If you want it, you've got to search for it. And he'll be looking at your games from 6:30 to 7:30, and then at 7:30, a special edition of Checkmating, Chess in the Romantic Era, with our substitute for this evening, National Master Jim McLaughlin, who usually teaches Tuesday night's Tactics Time class, and occasionally Chess Openings Explained. So you'll be seeing those tonight, and then I understand we might have a 3rd hour for you at 8:30 p.m. right back here in the studio.
A triple header.
We might. I don't know yet. We might have an edition of Ladies Play the People, and you never know who you're going to see on Ladies Play the People. This is the 2nd episode.
Wow.
Probably the best episode. So that's all we have to say about that. Tomorrow, we will see you once again. But until then, for the entire B team, today including Ryan Chester, Tammy Hyde, Danny Machuca, Isaac Schranz, my name is Ben Simon. He's the ChessBot Grandmaster, Aman Hambleton, with the awesome hair. And we say, so long from the Show Me State. This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.